Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's program. My name is Dr. Ken Irish Bramble. I am the Executive Director of the Caribbean Research Center here at Medgar Evers College, and I want to welcome all of you to this evening's conversation. This evening, we present to you another episode in our speaker series, this time done in collaboration with our sister center at the Brooklyn College of the City University of New York. And this evening, we're here to speak about and celebrate Creole language and culture throughout the Caribbean. As you are undoubtedly aware, there are quite a few territories throughout the region where Creole language is an integral part of the culture and the day-to-day experience of Caribbean people. And the same tradition has, of course, been carried over throughout the diaspora. This evening's conversation it'll be centered around a lecture by Dr. Kathy Depradine of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College in St. Lucia, who I will introduce formally in a. But in the interim, I would like to invite Dr. Marie-Lily Serra of the Haitian Studies Institute at Brooklyn College to make a few remarks and to welcome you to this evening's program. Dr. Serra?
Thank you, Dr. Ken Irish Bramble. Monsieur, Dame, la Société, bonsoir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Marie-Lily Serra, Monsieur, Dame, la the director of the CUNY Haitian Studies Institute at Brooklyn College. I do want to welcome you to this afternoon's conversation hosted by our sister center, the Caribbean Research Center at Medgar Evers College, and the Haitian Studies Institute here at Brooklyn College, featuring Dr. Kathy Depradine, who is joining us from the Caribbean island of St. Lucia. Let me briefly tell you a little bit about the Institute. Our mission is to produce and disseminate research on Haiti and Haitians, to engage in the analysis of policy that links scholarship and social action impacting Haitians, Haiti, and its diaspora, and to collaborate with and support various organizations in the community that serve Haiti and Haitians to build greater capacity. But let me mention here that our mission also states that while the Institute is primarily focusing on Haiti, Haitians, and people of Haitian origin, we will also foster collaboration with scholars and institutions, engage in research initiatives on other Caribbean nations, and the African diaspora where appropriate. This afternoon's event, in fact, illustrates this aspect of our mission. It is also the result of numerous constructive exchanges with Dr. Ken Irish Bramble of the Caribbean Research Center at Medgar Evers College. Dr. Bramble and I, among others, who hail from the Caribbean or who are in the field of Caribbean studies, recognize the need to build community, both at home and in the diaspora. And I have to say thank you, Dr. Bramble, for organizing last May this conversation titled All Eyes on Haiti, which featured me as one of the speakers, where we were able not only to highlight the remarkable contribution of Haiti and Haitians to the modern world by overturning this colonial slavery system and being the precursor of the notion of human rights, but where we also had some hard questions about the present of Haiti and certainly the future of Haiti. So I want to thank you for that. It was indeed following that forum that Dr. Irish Bramble and I decided that whenever possible, we need to join forces to shed light on matters and issues of importance to our Caribbean community, both at home and in diaspora, and to continuously engage in building community. That said, today's conversation with Dr. Depradine, Language Rights and Education in the Caribbean, a critical assessment, is illustrative of that commitment. Dr. Depradine is speaking as part of our 2023 annual conference on Haitian Creole language and culture symposium that has been happening in New York for over 20 years. We began marking that date soon after Creole communities around the world decided that International Creole Day was going to be officially instituted in October 8, 1983. I won't take you through that history, but this annual symposium on Haitian Creole language and culture offers Haitians and Haitian Americans a platform to discuss issues and challenges faced by Haitian Creole speaking children and families here and at home. It brings together scholars, educators, students, artists, activists, and people of all ages in the community to reflect and learn how to advocate for language justice, language rights, and language access for the community. It also serves as a space to encourage research on Haitian Creole and to encourage production of materials in the language, materials that will serve when Haiti truly engages in a literacy campaign at home. Moreover, this conference creates opportunities for greater knowledge and understanding of Haitian linguistic and cultural practices. It fosters alliances with individuals and institutions to help advance the cause of the linguistic and cultural rights of Haitians. The event, happening every year, is part of International Creole Day celebration involving all the Creole communities around the world. It aligns with that global endeavor to validate and affirm language and culture rights as fundamental human rights. So we at the Institute and in the Haitian community are delighted and tremendously pleased to have with us Dr. Depradine, a linguist from St. Lucia, to join this conversation. A huge welcome to you, Dr. Depradine. And once again, I want to thank Dr. Ken Irish Bramble for this partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. As usual, you are way too generous. I'll add to her explanation as to how we got to this point, that it was really her passion and her drive to ensure that the conversation around Creole embraced the larger Caribbean, even though this is this event is being brought to you as part of the Haitian Creole Language and Culture Symposium, that she had the vision to say that there are conversations within the context of that theme, that region, and this is in many ways what has led to tonight's event. So once again, Dr. Sarah, we thank you for your leadership and your vision and for all the work that you do at the Institute. All right, at this time, I'd also like to introduce Mr. Yves Raymond. And Yves Raymond is joining us this evening as a discussant and moderator for the conversation, the rich conversation which we anticipate following Dr. Depradine's presentation. I'll throw in a little bit of a comical jab at myself, that the evening's panel, who is not fluent in a French-based Creole, and so therefore Yves, your assistance in helping us to moderate this conversation cannot be understated. Just allow me to share a little bit about Yves first. So Yves was born in Béjot, in the southern department of Haiti. He completed his basic education in Haiti before moving to the United States. Here in the United States, he has studied at Brooklyn College, Harvard University, and holds numerous degrees also from Long Island University. He has made a career as a high school teacher here in the United States, where he teaches science and math, and also teaches Creole as a native language. He has designed and implemented bilingual programs for bilingual Haitian students. And in addition, he teaches Haitian language culture for bilingual teachers at the City College of the City University of New York, and also here at Medgar Evers College of the City University of New York. Eve, I want to welcome you, and got to unmute, Eve.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much.
Right. So at this point, we're going to jump right into it. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you, the listening audience, here in the United States, in the Caribbean, and I understand that there are even some joining us from Europe. Tonight's keynote speaker, so to speak, Dr. Kathy Depredin, who is not just a colleague, but someone who I consider to be a friend, having worked with her years on organizing regional debating competitions in the Windward Islands. So please allow me a minute to give you a little bit of background about Dr. Depredin. Dr. Depredin has been a teacher for over 26 years. She has spent the first 10 years of her teaching career at the Cicerone Combined School, and has been a lecturer of language and linguistics at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College in St. Lucia for the past 16 years. Dr. Depredin is very passionate about language learning and teaching in Creole or the vernacular context, such as that which exists in the former British territories of the Eastern Caribbean, and also with equipping teachers of language arts with the necessary skills to function effectively in these contexts. She holds a BA and a PhD in linguistics, both from the University of the West Indies. Dr. Depredin is currently the head of the Modern Language Learning Unit at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, but also serves in other capacities. As I mentioned a minute ago, she has served as the chair of the inaugural the Windward Islands, debating competition in 2017, and is the chair of the Sir Arthur Lewis Planning Committee for the Windward Islands debating competition, which we are looking forward to, Dr. Depredin. We'll talk afterwards about our long history and the connection there. She was a member of the 2017 OECS ITN Haiti mission team, and a member of the planning committee for the St. Lucia Language Policy and Instruction Conference held that year. She is involved in local, regional, educational research and policy development, and serves on the steering committee of the St. Lucia Language Policy and Implementation Plan. She has taught a range of language courses, within the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College Certificate and Associate Degree Programs, the JBTE Associate Degree Programs, and the University of the West Indies / SALCC Bachelor of Education Program. Dr. Depredin also serves as a master teacher for the Peace Corps pre-service training, which she did in 2017. She has numerous publications to her name. I won't read them all out, but but needless to say, she has quite a distinguished career as an academic in the region and on the subject matter of linguistics. So it is a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Depredin.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Dr. Irish Bramble. It is certainly a pleasure to be with you and the other members of the panel this evening. I shall begin by saying this. Messieurs, mesdames, bon après-midi. Mais moi, quoi, talent ni pour dire bon souhait, puis haka vin noué dehors. Moi, content ouais tout ici à Oswaya, parce que Oswaya nous kay poser, nous kay un petit poser, et nous kay poser franchement du valet créole, et toutes les autres langues maman nous au lion kawaïb là. Bonsoir. So, good evening. And of course, as I said earlier, it is certainly a pleasure to be here with you. I intend for us, or I'm hoping that this evening we have a very frank conversation about our Creole languages, whether particularly, yes, our English Creole languages, but with a slant, particularly about our French Creoles, whether we refer to the Creole as Creole, as we do in St. Lucia, Creole. Yes, we just really want to highlight the value of those languages for a variety of spheres, not just for, well, particularly for education, but we know that our Creole languages are significant, our Caribbean Creoles are significant, and they do in fact have a lot of value, particularly for education and where we go with instruction. So this evening, in order to have our conversation, this evening, in order to guide our conversation, I will first touch on the language situation in the Caribbean, then the role of language policies in ensuring inclusivity in education, the benefits to be derived from including Creole languages as part of a bilingual approach to language instruction, and of course, how we go about approaching or the recommendations for approaching bilingual instruction. So I start off by commenting on the language situation in the region. The linguistic situation of some of the former European colonies of the Caribbean region is today characterized by the presence of Creole languages. Harrington, in his piece, The Status of Creole Languages, states that these languages coexist with and continue to be viewed in terms of the European languages, which are the lexical sources. So in the former British colonies, which make up most of the region, the lexicons of the Creoles come from English, except in the cases of St. Lucia and Dominica, where the source of their Creoles is French. Of course, we have to note that our French sisters, with whom we also share a mutually intelligible French Creole, which of course has its lexifier as French. The presence of these Creoles has led to the creation of a situation of different language profiles. Now, those language profiles are usually pretty evident when you look at the makeup or the composition of language classrooms in the region. Now, once we look at what happens in our classrooms, our language classrooms, we can take those to be a microcosm of what occurs in terms of language distribution generally in the wider society. So as I've said, the classroom or the language situation has led to us noticing that our learners in the classroom have different language profiles, okay? And generally speaking, we have persons who will exhibit the following language profiles. First, in the English-speaking Caribbean, you may have individuals whose first language is English and who may have competence in an English vernacular or an English Creole. You may also have individuals whose first language is an English-based Creole or a vernacular variety. And you may also have individuals whose first language is a Creole with a lexical base, which is not English. And of course, in our sister French islands, we have the latter profile occurring. In a country such as St. Lucia, therefore, it would not be unusual in a language classroom to find instances of learners who would fall within each or exhibit each of the profiles or the characteristics outlined here. Now, I must note that these profiles, which I have highlighted here, have been put forward by Simmons McDonald in her article, Competence, Proficiency, and Language Acquisition. So she states that these are the profiles that you will get predominantly being exhibited by the St. Lucian learner in the classroom. Okay, so the existence of that variation and the occurrence rather of that variation and the coexistence of our Creole languages, whether French-based, English-based or otherwise, have led linguists in the region to identify language continuums in the various territories. So the concept of the continuum is generally explained as comprising the two languages on the polar ends as the basilect and acrolectal varieties and other intermediate or mesolectal varieties in between, although I must acknowledge that there's some disagreement on exactly how the continuum functions. What is important to note is that coexistence of basilectal, intermediate, and acrolectal varieties has led to the creation of both bidialectal language situations and, of course, bilingual language situations. That designation, that characterization of the context, the description of the language, the regional language situation in terms of being bidialectal or bilingual has been put forward or was put forward by Dennis Craig. So he states that a bidialectal situation exists when the natural language of the children differs from the standard, but is at the same time sufficiently related to it for there to be some degree of overlap at the level of perhaps vocabulary and grammar. He also contends that if the degree, that in some cases, an approximation of a genuinely bilingual situation may also exist. And this occurs if the degree of congruency between the two languages is not sufficient to encourage mutual intelligibility in continuous speech, even with the presence of lexical similarities between the two languages. The sociolinguistic phenomena which have been created as a result of the history of the former colonies are defined by the designation of certain functions to both Creoles and standard varieties. Although the Creoles are spoken by most individuals during their daily interactions, they exist alongside standard languages which are officially supposed to be used in courts, formal contexts such as courts, education, in church, and in general communication with the public. The use of the Creole varieties, however, extend in many instances subconsciously into these domains in many instances. This may occur to the extent that sometimes it is very difficult for persons to distinguish between what is supposed to be the Creole variety and what is supposed to be the standard variety. And that is because of the sort of crossover in terms of function. And this is especially true for us in the English-speaking countries. And it does have serious implications, especially for the domain of education. Okay. So I will move on from the description of the language situation into the definition or highlighting very critical things to our discussion. And these are the terms mother tongue and home language. In many instances, those terms are used quite interchangeably. Many times we use them to mean the same thing. Yeah. I'll start off by highlighting that UNESCO from 1953 has been a leading advocate for mother tongue instruction in schools. Notwithstanding, UNESCO in 2021 noted that approximately 40% of the world's learners do not have access to instruction in their mother tongue. Issues related to determining language policy and the perceived status of mother tongue learners, the degree of availability of instructional materials in the home language, teacher preparation, the role of the community, and the preschool or out-of-school language preparation, inclusion and equity have been identified by the organization as factors which have significantly impacted the degree of access which learners have to home language instruction. Within our context, home languages would be, or our Creoles would more often than not be those home languages. I want to highlight a distinction, which Simmons McDonald in Jules and Belder 2021 makes between the two terms. She defines the home language as the language a person speaks in the home and in the home and often in the community as well. While the first language is that language which a person acquires first in childhood. Otherwise referred to as a mother tongue, a native language, yeah, or in Creole we would say lang money. Those two, whether whether home language or first language, differ significantly from the learned languages, or the standard varieties which learners would acquire through formal education. Simmons McDonald does make the point, however, that in bilingual households in the region, it is possible to have two first or native languages, and if one is used more extensively than the other for everyday communication, then that one would be designated the home language. Now, typically, in contexts in which mother tongue-based education is being introduced or home language education is being introduced, or where a threatened local or community language is being used, as indicated earlier, there's usually a well-established legal language of education, which is different from that first language or home language. In terms of language policies, much research by seminal linguists such as Craig and Roberts and other language activists have identified the presence or absence of language policies as one of, if not the most critical determinant of the systematic use of the home language or first language during instruction. So during the rest of my presentation, I will explore the role of home language or the first language in education and the inescapable link to language and rights and the concept of equity. Commenting specifically on the situation in the Caribbean, Nero 2022 cites Ruiz 1998's orientations to language policy. Now, that orientation establishes that the framing of policies as part of language planning is influenced by and reflects wider societal beliefs on the value of languages and their roles. According to Nero, Ruiz proposed three orientations of language policy. The first one is language as a problem. Now, that orientation is such that it sees local or vernacular or home languages as problems, standing in the way of incorporating culturally and linguistically minoritized groups into the society as large, because they are often linked to poverty, low educational achievement, and lack of social mobility. The other orientation that influences or has an impact on the approach used to develop language policies is language as a right. That orientation sees local languages as a basic human and civil right for its speakers and seeks affirmation of those rights in the public sphere and in education. Third orientation is language as a resource. That orientation sees local languages as a resource not only for its speakers, but for the general society, and seeks their cultivation and development as resources for the society, lest they become extinct. I want to highlight here the unwavering efforts of local activists, St. Lucian activists, who include Dame Paulette Louisy, Governor General Emerita of St. Lucia, Professor Hazel Simmons MacDonald, Professor Emerita of the UNI Open Campus, and other sterling individuals in St. Lucia who have worked tirelessly to drive language policy for the island. I would hasten to add that it is my position that perhaps a combination of influences from those orientations that Ruiz has identified, accompanied by a lack of political will, has certainly impacted or impeded efforts to get language policies ratified in our jurisdiction. Similarly, it is Nero's position that the non-ratification of the language education policy in Jamaica is rooted in resistance to a change in what she terms the existing monolingual orientation, which dates back to colonialism. Notwithstanding, within our own context, continued efforts have taken us to the point of the draft St. Lucia language policy as of 2018, and ongoing work on the implementation plan to accompany that policy. It is therefore, again, my position that language policies having their intended impact is contingent upon achieving that delicate balance between ideologies which reflect language as a right and language as a resource. Certainly not language as a property. I want to draw attention to Nero's summary of important language education policy developments in the Caribbean. She goes through three main periods, which are quite encouraging in terms of our journey as a region in recognizing and giving credence and giving the rightful recognition to our Creoles, to our home languages. So we would have started off the journey during the colonial era, which would have been from the 19th to the mid 20th century, when our mother tongues, our home languages, our Creoles were essentially invisible. There was no official policy. English was considered to be, or perhaps French, but erroneously considered to be our mother tongues. And there was this de facto effort at the eradication of those languages which were seen as less than whatever the languages of instruction were, okay? And we move on to another period, essentially a period during which the countries of the region were gaining independence. between the 1940s and the 1960s. And that period is characterized by the visibility of Creole languages, increased linguistic awareness, and of course, in 1948, the base of Creole research and language education policy development, the development or the creation of the Dictionary of Jamaican English, important strides in terms of the recognition of Creole languages as worthy. We move on to the period between the 1970s and 1980s, which were characterized by social movements, Black pride, more access to schooling, and of course, a recognition that there was a literacy crisis. So one of the significant strides was that Creole was made an official language in Haiti. But that was there with education being in French. You had the promotion of monoliterate transitional bilingualism. Literacy was in English only. In the Netherlands Antilles, the Dutch medium of instruction, papiamento instruction, was permitted in the primary grades in 1979. Excuse me. We had the Dictionary of Caribbean English, republished in 1996. And of course, there was activism, which put the significance of Creole as languages and as markers of identity, really put the spotlight on Creoles as part of our culture, of our cultural heritage. In the 2000s, I believe that period really tells us that there is hope. I prefer to be very optimistic about the impact and the direction in which language policies are moving. So we have a period where the draft Jamaican language education policy was developed, the JLU was founded, the bilingual education project in Jamaica was implemented. There was a proposal for language education policy in Trinidad and Tobago in 2010. Then we had the publication of the Dictionary of Trinidadian English, Creole. Then we had the consignment in 2010, Creole English Biliteracy Project. And in Haiti, the Education in Creole, the MIT Haiti Initiative in 2015. In addition to those strides, I would add something certainly very proud of, the draft language policy for St. Lucia, which was completed in 2018, and for which there's a work has started a step further on the work of the implementation plan. So I believe that there is hope, that there is a foundation through the efforts of many other persons. I'm the child in when it comes to those efforts, and I believe that there has certainly been a significant foundation which has been set, and which will allow work on pushing for language education policies to continue. Moving on from language education policies, I will go on to just touch a bit on inclusion in education. The UNESCO 2019 Cali commitment reaffirmed the commitment for, quote, providing equitable and inclusive quality education for all learners from the early years through compulsory schooling, technical and vocational education and training, higher education, and lifelong learning. Further, the document states that inclusion means, quote, ensuring full participation and access to quality learning opportunities for all children, young people, and adults, respecting and valuing diversity, and eliminating all forms of discrimination in and through education. The term inclusion therefore represents a commitment to making preschools, schools, and other education settings places in which everyone is valued and belongs, and places in which diversity is seen as enriching. Therefore, it is important that language policies recognize that the instructional needs of monolingual and bilingual speakers of Creoles must be catered to. And they must not only be developed and left in draft form, but all efforts have to be made to ensure that they are ratified, because they are both necessary and long overdue, particularly in some of the former British territories. In terms of the role of Creoles or first languages in education, I believe we can all agree, or perhaps some persons may beg to differ, but certainly from my end, first languages, home languages, Creole languages are critical for a number of reasons, okay? And we can start off by looking at the similarities and differences that exist between the processes of acquiring a first language and the second, or the processes that are the similarities between the processes of acquiring a first language and learning a second. Okay. Although the contribution of the learner's first language cannot be ignored, there's considerable disagreement on how significant a role is played by it. Bernhard and Camille, in their discussion on whether second language reading should be characterized as a language problem or a reading problem, examine the conflicting linguistic threshold and linguistic interdependence hypotheses. And they provide a means of reconciling the problems with a strict adherence to the premises of reconciling the problems with a strict adherence to the premises of either one would pause. This reconciliation can be achieved through the consolidation of the two hypotheses, since it is impossible to ignore the contribution of first language reading proficiency to that of the second, or that of a certain degree of linguistic ability in the second language. In terms of including, or if we are to include Creole languages in instruction, there are some issues which have to be given due consideration. For example, Robertson states that it exists in his peace language education policy that the existing conditions, particularly in the former British colonies, present the biggest challenges. These include conditions which kind of nurture misconceptions about the actual linguistic situations, some of which include that teachers function in standard English, and that the vernacular and the standard, or the Creole and the standard, have a completely diglossic relationship, and that the dialect spoken by vernacular speakers is in fact standard, especially when it comes to English. Another misconception worth noting is that English Creoles, or in the case of St. Lucia, the Creole influenced variety, are in fact broken English. And I'm certain in the French territories, there are certainly some individuals who subscribe to those thoughts, that the Creole is some sort of illegitimate version of the more prestigious standard variety. And that misconception certainly has led to fights against the inclusion or non-recognition of the significance of Creoles, or the significance that they can have, or the impact that they can have, particularly education. Okay. So such attitudes, such perspectives can, if persons subscribe to them, can in fact have an impact on the instructional methods that are employed during in language classroom. Because if you view a language as one language, a Creole, as an illegitimate form of a standard variety, it means that more than likely your pedagogical practice will not be suitable in order to get learners to develop the necessary competence in the standard variety. Okay? And these would take away from the systematic and in-depth study of perhaps contrasts between both vernacular varieties and Creole varieties and the standard which is being taught alongside them in schools. And that situation is the same within the solution context, because if, for instance, our English vernacular variety is viewed as a broken form, or is viewed solely as a broken form of standard English, it means that the in-depth study of contrast between the solution English vernacular and the standard English, which would focus on grammatical or syntactic differences between the two varieties, will be lost. And inadvertently, it means that instructors may be reinforcing the vernacular variety as a standard variety. I take this discussion to the in terms of the impact on instruction to excerpts from CXC reports over the years, which highlight that perhaps there is an issue with the approaches or the methodologies that are being used to teach or being used during language instruction. So the 2011 CXC report on candidates' work in the secondary education certificate examination in English A and its recommendations for teachers alludes to the veracity of that statement which I made earlier. According to the report, it is clear that hundreds of students across the Caribbean have not mastered the use of standard English, and that there continues to be interference from dialects and patois used throughout the region. The report goes on to suggest that for students who almost abhor reading, some methods must be found to encourage the correct use of language. The 2013 report on the June sitting of the English A examinations also expresses similar sentiments, which point to the tendency of students to express themselves in essay-type questions using the vernacular or Creoles of their countries of origin. Further, the May-June 2015 report states that candidates had challenges with mastering the syntax of standard English to express themselves clearly. It must be noted that by the time our learners or a learner writes the CSEC examination, he or she would have been in the school system for approximately a period of 12 years. And we're talking about approximately a period of 12 years of language instruction. Allow that to sink in. The fact that many of our learners still have problems with standard English at the end of their secondary school tenure seems to be a reflection of the absence of an important component of the learning situation. This component may very well be linked to the quality of exposure of English, the quality of exposure to English which is the learners receive. It is clear, therefore, that learners must receive appropriate instructional support from the early years, because this is important if they are to develop critical skills along with positive attitudes towards language learning. In terms of recommendations for how instruction should progress, it has been stated that any program which is designed to implement vernacular or home language instruction must take into account certain factors. Dennis Craig, in Teaching Language and Literacy Policies and Procedures for Vernacular Situations, highlights the fact that such programs would need to reflect cognitive continuity and language and develop language awareness in learners, that these programs would need to reflect or ensure that the distinction is apparent between the vernacular and the target language, the fact that such programs would need to orient teaching and learning, which will satisfy other stated needs while taking learners through the stages of perception and reception, internalization and understanding, and creative utilization in relation to the target language. I want to highlight a specific approach which Craig speaks of, and that is the augmented language experience approach. This is a modification of a previous approach which he had developed, which was the language experience approach. Now, that approach is said to be suited for the vernacular speaker who faces the task of first, the vernacular or even the Creole speaker, who faces the task of first having to learn the language which he or she is expected to, in which he or she is expected to read and write. So again, think about what we're asking of our learners when they begin formal instruction. A lot of them are coming to us with languages, first languages or home languages, or competence, oral competence in languages which are different from the language of instruction. But we expect that as soon as they come into the classroom, that they would begin to function in terms of exhibiting literacy skills, reading and writing in the language of the classroom. Okay, so the main feature of that language experience approach was to give equal attention to the language to be read and the ideas that have to be communicated in that language. Now, that augmented language experience approach is significant because it will develop two components of language proficiency. And these are analysis of linguistic knowledge and control of linguistic processing. And that those are components of language proficiency were put forward by Ellen Scott. Okay, and she looks at proficiency. She argues that proficiency in a language can only be attained if instructional programs focus on developing both of these components. So the fact that Craig's augmented language experience approach affords equal attention to the communication of ideas in the language to be learned demonstrates a commitment to developing the learner's role of linguistic processing with that learner's ability to analyze knowledge. How am I on?
You're doing okay on time, but the signal seems to be fading, seems to have faded over the last few seconds.
Oh, are we okay now?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Thank you so much. Notwithstanding those recommendations, one of the problems faced by teachers and developers of curricula is that there's this uncertainty in terms of the degree of emphasis which should be placed on form-based and on meaning-based instruction. And what happens in many instances is that instruction at the early levels is predominantly focused on form, focuses on the analysis of linguistic knowledge. Issues will arise because this aspect is encouraged at the expense of developing control of linguistic processing. The development of control of linguistic processing, if encouraged, would bridge the gap between form and meaning-based instruction. The combination of these two types of instruction is the recipe for the development of language proficiency. The practice of developing one component of language proficiency at the expense of another can have devastating effects on learners who have little or no oral competence in the language of instruction and are therefore unable to extract or even express meaning in that language. Moreover, a linear focus on correcting forms has proven to be more of a hindrance to the development of language proficiency because it may cause Creole or vernacular speakers to become uncommunicative in the language classroom. The deliberate teaching of structures can also, within the language classroom, suggested for Creole and vernacular context, also includes the use of contrastive analysis, which helps learners develop language awareness. It allows young vernacular learners to recognize the existence of two distinct codes, by focusing on the differences. Apart from contrastive analysis, another approach that is suggested as appropriate for developing vernacular and Creole language abilities, or the language abilities of Creole or vernacular speakers, is the application of immersion, okay, which refers to Brian refers to as the exclusive use of the target language in a classroom of second language learners to one which provides the varied content that a Creole or vernacular context demands. It is this context that dictates that the child needs to hear and be immersed in the contours and the nuances of a language she or he rarely hears out of school. Consequently, the onus is on the instructor to provide increased ways for the learner to interact with the standard. For example, in oral activities around reading and stories which show how appropriate language should be used. The final suggested model I will touch on is the tripartite model of instruction, which was proposed by Hazel Simmons McDonald. And it can be said to reflect features of an awareness program. Now, awareness programs were recommended by Siegel, and he stated that awareness programs were programs in which the stigmatized variety is the object of study in the context of discussions of language diversity or literature. Now, Simmons McDonald's tripartite model specifically caters to the St. Lucian situation in that it takes into account the degree of language variation which is present in a St. Lucian classroom. This variation may present itself as heterogeneous groups of speakers of all three St. Lucian varieties, or homogeneous groups of St. Lucian English vernacular or Creole speakers. Its focus on the possible degrees of language variation exhibited by learners is expected to help eliminate the language and literacy issues which learners would face as a result of unofficial policy which dictate that communication and instruction must take place in only one code. One of the goals of the model are that Creole speakers in particular are expected to, among other outcomes, become proficient in the target language and use their first language academically. For the speakers of the vernacular, they're expected to, or the program is expected to promote an understanding of the difference between the St. Lucian English vernacular and the St. Lucian Standard English. It is supposed to foster literacy in English and promote the development of academic language proficiency. And for the speaker of St. Lucian Standard English, it is expected to develop early literacy and academic language proficiency in this variety, and for the learner to be able to use all other varieties spoken in St. Lucia as vehicles of, to express their creativity. Notwithstanding those recommendations, I just want to highlight a point which was made by Roberts in integrating Creole into Caribbean classrooms. He points to the fact that historically, Creoles have always been a part of the language classroom, used at the discretion of teachers in order to explain concepts to students who would otherwise have not understood these concepts in the target language. However, the main issue is that while the teacher could use the Creole, the pupils were not supposed to. So in other words, the use of the Creole variety was not part of a systematic and well-planned instructional approach. So of course, it would have the opposite effects in that the teacher may have inadvertently, instead of teaching the standard variety, been inadvertently reinforcing the Creole variety within the classroom. Now, it is important to be, or having that happen, or we need to be very mindful or careful that we do not find ourselves in such a situation, because the goal is instruction. The goal of instruction, is to ensure that the learners are competent in both codes. And we have to be careful not to be inadvertently developing a situation of subtractive bilingualism. But while I'm saying we have to be careful, unfortunately, that has been the case for many native speakers of Creole languages. So it is against the backdrop of this discussion of a complex language situation, instructional issues, that I would like to share the results of some of the results of my research, which sought to investigate whether an instructional program which focused on the use of Creole and Standard English would result in short-term benefits, such as the manifestation of bilingual literacy skills, reading accuracy, and phonological awareness for learners, and make them well-placed to receive long-term benefits. Extant research gives evidence that learners who acquire early bilingualism are better placed than their monolingual counterparts when it comes to learning a third language. So essentially, just going to give a quick summary. Guided by the tenets of positivism, The research was carried out mainly using the intervention experiment design. More specifically through the single subject experimental design. Such a design is appropriate in instances where a return to baseline behaviors once a treatment or an intervention has been administered is either impossible or undesirable or even unethical. Okay. Let me just share something. So just a quick summary here. The investigation into the use of Creole and Standard English to develop the bilingual literacy skills included 17 learners. 3 they were at the kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2 levels. They were students of a multi-grade school, so they all were in the same class. We had 4 kindergarten females, 3 males, 3 grade 1 males, 1 female, 4 grade 2 males, and 2 females. You can see their age ranges there. So the program was directed at a total of 17 learners. The variables tested for the grade 1 and grade 2 students were reading accuracy in English and Creole and phonological awareness in English and Creole. The variables tested for the kindergarten students were phonological awareness in English and Creole. In order to collect data on reading accuracy in English and Creole from the grade 1 and grade 2 students, the reading record developed by Dupree and Iverson was used. To collect English phonological awareness data from all the learners, the test of phonological awareness, or the TOPA, kindergarten and the early elementary versions were used were appropriate. In order to collect data on phonological awareness in Creole, I developed 2 tests. Data were collected for the grade 1 and grade 2 students over 13 weeks. And data for kindergarten students were collected over 16 weeks. I would just want to summarize the results for reading accuracy for the purposes of this presentation. The results for phonological awareness are reported elsewhere. So, out of the 8 grade 1 and grade 2 students, you will note that 5 of them were identified as bilingual speakers of Creole and the St. Lucian English vernacular. 3 were identified as monolingual speakers of the St. Lucian English vernacular at the beginning of the study. Most of them operated at the frustrational levels when it came to their reading. You will notice that in some instances, the learners were able to show comparable gains in both languages after similar amounts of time had elapsed in terms of instructional time, while others needed more time for comparable progress in the 2 languages to become evident. For example, after 4 weeks of intervention in each language, Gina, pseudonym of course, was able to read at the independent level, and Ivan read at the independent level after only 2 weeks of instruction in each language. 4 weeks of instruction placed Quentin at the instructional level in both languages, and after 1 week of instruction in both languages, Jaden was able to read at the independent level. Something else which stood out was that the learners took different amounts of time in order to respond to the instruction or interventions in each language. They took different amounts of time to gain control of reading material and to demonstrate an ability to read independently, irrespective of whether they were classified as monolingual speakers of the St. Lucian English vernacular or bilingual speakers of the St. Lucian English vernacular and Creole at the start of the study. All of the learners who at the beginning of the study were classified as bilinguals, note, had higher reading scores in Creole than in English. Now, while they were identified as bilingual speakers of Creole and the St. Lucian English vernacular, it was evident from the language samples taken from them that they were actually initially Creole speakers. And they would have more than likely developed the St. Lucian English vernacular from coming to school or being in the school environment. All of those students who at the beginning of the study, as I said, were classified as bilinguals, had higher reading accuracy scores in Creole than in English. Yes, so for them, their primary home language was Creole. So that performance is not surprising, or was not surprising, because it was consistent with the position that it is easier for a language learner to acquire literacy skills in the language which is known than in the unknown language. This is because whatever the child would have learned about his or her L1 or first language would contribute to his or her understanding of the second language. In fact, 4 out of the 5 bilingual students were able to demonstrate the ability to read independently in Creole within 3 weeks and less of Creole instruction. These results from the St. Lucia study are in line with the position of Anthony and Francis on phonological awareness and reading accuracy and reading development. They state that in the case of children reading in an alphabetic language, which has a transparent orthography, once they are exposed to literacy instruction, phonological awareness begins very quickly. So we saw similar results in terms of the fastest progress in learning to read accurately in English. Ivan and Jaden read independently after 2 weeks and 1 week respectively, and also had the highest initial Creole reading accuracy scores. They also progressed the fastest in terms of their Creole reading accuracy, reading independently after 2 weeks and 1 week of intervention respectively. So that the learners took different amounts of time to exhibit the desired behaviors is an indication for a need for instructional planning to suit not only the diversity of the classroom with respect to the first language, but also to suit the diversity in terms of ability and progress. So, based on the preceding discussion, how do we proceed with bilingual instruction? It is possible to choose from 2 options, perhaps looking at a phased program, such as what obtains in the Seychelles and in some instances in Haiti, where students are exposed to instruction in Creole for 1 to 2 years, and then the 3rd year, English or other languages are introduced. The other option is exposure in a concurrent program in which daily instruction is divided for a set of hours between English and Creole. A concurrent program would be suitable for homogeneous or heterogeneous class groupings, which are typical in St. Lucia. So the tripartite model, which Simmons McDonald developed, is such a program. Of course, these programs would have, especially in our context and certainly in others, would have benefits so that first language speakers of French Creole would gain literacy in their first language and transfer those skills to English and any other languages such as French and Spanish. English vernacular speakers would understand the fundamental differences between the first language and English and gain the opportunity to become bilingual in English and Creole and to transfer those literacy skills to other languages. And of course, for English speakers, monolingual English speakers, they would have the opportunity to gain literacy skills in their first language and Creole and to transfer literacy skills to other languages. All of the learners would gain the opportunity to develop an appreciation for the solution identity, of which Creole is a significant component. So we've gone through the suggested instructional approaches, also including a balanced approach to literacy development. As we've mentioned earlier, the use of contrastive analysis, the application of collaborative learning in instruction, and of course, exposure of learners to a rich literature. Now, of course, the application of these suggested procedures would come with questions about teacher competence in the Creole languages, and perhaps the costs associated with training and the professional development of teachers to develop those lessons. There are also implications for changes in curricula and the development of materials and getting individuals to see merit in such approaches. Notwithstanding these issues, the fact remains that changing our approaches to language instruction in the early grades will have long-term gains for our learners. Monsieur Yves and Dr. Sarah? Yes, do you use this term in Haitian Creole, bata?
Yes.
Right, so I will proceed to say that based on the preceding discussion, Creole pa pièce bata. Nous obligés respecter toutes ces Creoles-là, nous obligés respecter toutes ces langues maman nous au lieu kawaii. So the gains which we know our learners can receive, or that will be made by our learners if they are exposed to such programs, will only be realized if they have the weight of language policies, in which Creole languages are seen as a right and as a resource. Thank you so much for your attention. I will end on that note.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deperdine. As always, you did not disappoint at all, and that was quite informative and to a rich discussion following all of that. So thank you very much for presentation, for your lecture. I have a couple of quick questions, and if it's okay with you, Eve, I'll start off by opening it up, and then you jump in. So I'll start with the more academic, I guess, question. So I know you've been at the forefront and played an integral role for the integration of Creole into the school. And so I guess I'll ask the question that your detractors probably ask you quite a bit, or a version of it. So is the effort to have a greater recognition of Creole, or the various dialects, patois, whatever language we want to use to refer to them, is this struggle mostly a symbolic struggle against a colonial structure that has, as you put it, had marginalized this language, not recognized it, only saw it as a deviation from the standard? Is that what is at the core of this move? And the question, by the way, is open not just to you. I'm opening this also up in the context of Haiti, in the context of other, basically of the entire region, when you really think about it, because it does not require, as you pointed out, it's not only applicable to situations where there's a French-based Creole. The same arguments are true in Jamaica, where you're speaking an English-based patois. So is the struggle mostly symbolic? Is it mostly just a pushback against anti-colonialism, or an anti-colonialist pushback against the legacy of colonialism? That was better stated. Or is there some deeper, more and I want to say that wrong choice of words. Is there some other benefit that's to come out of recognition of Creole language, or greater recognition and respect for Creole language? I hope that question came out. I tried not to stumble over myself or offend anyone.
No, I don't think that it's an offensive question.
Very good.
As a matter of fact, I believe that part of what we are fighting against would in fact be deeply entrenched colonial attitudes to the languages. Historically, our Creole languages, our languages, have not enjoyed any significant status. As a matter of fact, there were lots of efforts at eradication. I'm certain the experiences may have been similar in Haiti. While I did not experience a lot of it, but I was certainly told about learners in the school system who came in as first language Creole speakers being beaten both in the classroom and even at home if they continued to speak Creole. And mind you, they would have been chastised, punished otherwise by parents whose first language was in fact Creole, by parents who did not have competence in the standard variety or even in the vernacular variety. But because status, a movement in terms of, symbolic status in the society was tied to the language that the individual used. Yes, many parents, and deeply entrenched, many individuals those ideologies have been passed down to many of our individuals in our local context. And these attitudes persist today and are responsible for a lot of the fight or the pushback that those of us who understand the educational and cognitive benefits of recognizing and giving those languages their true place in education. That is the reason why there's a lot of pushback. And interestingly, we're not saying not to teach the standard. We're not saying that at all. We are saying, let us recognize that current approaches to instruction are not necessarily having the desired effects, are not necessarily resulting in the degrees of competence, cognitive academic language proficiency, which should be the goal of language instruction. We're saying, let us use what the learners come in with in order for us to get there. We're not saying don't teach English, don't teach French. No, we're saying your learner, your child comes into us with an ability that can actually be capitalized upon and can actually assist in his literacy or his or her literacy development. So I will allow.
Yeah,
you jump in.
I'd like to jump in a little bit. I think one's language is very much tied to their identity, to their sense of self.
Yes.
And to the extent that you marginalize students' language, you make them feel ashamed, you make them feel a sense of low self-esteem. And I'll tell you what used to happen to Haitian students who would attend American schools, high schools, and they would go into the school and they would ask them, what language do you speak at home? They would say French, even though they didn't speak French at home, because they wanted to be perceived as somebody who spoke French, because French had a higher status, so that became an issue. And the kids need to feel that they belong somewhere. They need to feel that they have an identity that is their own. And so that's the first point. The second point is, it's not just anti-colonialist. There are actual benefits to using the Creole language in education. And these benefits have proven themselves. I don't have to rehash all the research, but there are actual educational benefits to using Creole languages in education.
I do think it's important to rehash, to go back to the research, because for years, people know the benefits, not only the cognitive benefits of being bilingual and multilingual, the social benefits, the economic benefits. The more languages you have, the more access you have to a variety of sources of information. If I speak Latin, I can read in original Latin. If I speak Italian, I can read Dante in its original language. So the more languages you have, the more your access to knowledge around the world. And it is unquestionable. From Bialystok to, you can go to the NIH site right now, and you can find an article that says there are cognitive and neurological benefits of bilingualism or multilingualism. From childhood to adulthood, you can go to the NIH site right now, and you'll see that, in fact, people who suffer from aphasia, if they speak more than one languages, they gain back their language skills faster, so on and so forth. But it's this, and let me finish by saying, as a bilingual educator myself, when sometimes I'm reading history and I'm realizing the founding fathers of this nation, they spoke Greek, they spoke Latin, they spoke French, they spoke German, they spoke English. And still, people with means send their children to learn other languages and overseas to acquire other languages. So why is it that kids who come to us, like Dr. Depradine said, with this asset, which is the Creole language of their community, why are we attacking, trying to eradicate that language, rather than having a constructivist approach where you build on what the kids bring to school? So we need to go back to the research. I think we often have to tell them what the research said about the value of being bilingual, multilingual, having various language resources at your disposal. Thank you so much, Dr. Adine, for this brilliant, and as you said at the beginning, frank and courageous conversation about the language situation in our basin, in our Caribbean basin. Eve, I'm passing it on to you again, sir.
Yeah. I think it's like building a house. You need a strong foundation, and that foundation is that home language, that language that they bring to the school with them. And once you have that foundation, you could build higher and higher, as need be. But you need that foundation. Any other comments or questions?
I want to talk a little bit about and I'm asking this question to all of the um, participants here. What, what role does classism, linguistic classism, um, play in this struggle? So, in terms of the formal integration of Creole languages, Haiti is way out in front, and the rest of the region is following. And the conversation about rethinking it, and it's also not unique to the region, right? I mean, in North America, you had the Ebonics conversation that got shotgunned within within a very short period of time. I'm inviting you guys to speak to our audience a little bit about the classism that surrounds your home. I'll leave it there nice and broad and that you guys take it wherever you want. So Dr. Depredine, you want to start off?
Yes, I can start off. Due to the fact that we are still working on the language policy, yes, there isn't any official mandate as yet for the inclusion of French Creole in formal inclusion in schools. However, there is a plan to pilot a part of the suggested model within the gamuts of the implementation plan. So that should be happening very, very soon, because certainly a pilot is critical in determining, or would give a lot of weight. The results of piloting the suggested approaches would be very, very critical in determining the way forward. Yes. I always like to speak about my institution as being a little forward thinking in that regard, in terms of instruction. We, as part of the bachelor's degree in education, as a matter of fact, we offer a functional Creole, course to all learners at the college. So that level 1 course can be taken by any student of any program across the college. And the objectives of that program are essentially to teach the basic Creole literacy skills to learners, get them to be able to use the language, not just in terms of basic interpersonal communication skills, because a lot of them come in with the oral competence in the language, but to be able to develop literacy in it. Now, what the Bachelor of Education, the way it is structured, the way that program is structured, is that teachers, so while the other students at the college can choose between Creole and French or Mandarin and so on, our teachers who do the SALCC Bachelor of Education program have to do Functional Creole 1. Yes? So we are already equipping our teachers who take that program with the content knowledge and the content skills, the language skills, the essential language skills, for which they would simply have to perhaps get additional training, but the basics of language instruction, the principles of language instruction can be applied and used to teach Creole. So a lot of what we're seeing is that when it is time to pilot the Creole program here, we would have already had a cadre of teachers who already have the linguistic skills in the language. In addition to that course, we have a second course, Creole Level 2 course, which delves into theories of creolization, the origin of Creoles, looking at Creolite, looking at translation and so on, which persons can use for in other spheres, perhaps for maybe journalism, etc. So the teachers also do that second level course as part of their program. So in the absence of the official policy, I am very, very happy to say that the South Louis Community College has, taken the lead in that regard. Yes, so we would have already put in some groundwork and we are ready for the implementation phase, the piloting phase of the suggested programs.
Can I respond a little bit?
Oh, please, no, go ahead, Eve.
Racism issue. It is often said that when you denigrate a language, you're not really denigrating just the language, you're denigrating the people who speak the language. And it's very often people in the lower socioeconomic classes that are Creole speakers. So in effect, there is a classism issue involved here. So you're not just denigrating the language, but you're denigrating the people who actually speak that language. I also, well, I'll mention that a little later. I'll leave.
No, I mean, like, it's an important conversation, so go for it. But if you want a second to think it through, I'll throw in a mix into the question.
Go ahead.
So, and I, in my personal experience, it varies from territory to territory that you visit. But there are occasions where there is a clear divide, a clear class divide, even in terms of not just, well, I guess it's both approaches and views of Creole, but in terms of whether or not it is the primary language. I guess I'm trying to put this as simply as possible. So, and I don't know what the case is in Haiti, and in St. Lucia, it's a little more blurred to me. All right. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Depardine. Is there a clear sort of dividing line, class dividing line, that you sort of that separates a segment of the population into, we speak English and no Creole, no patois is spoken here, versus I've seen it manifest differently. I think you know what I'm asking, but just to make it a little more clear. So, does the upper middle class in St. Lucia embrace the use of Creole, or to what degree do they embrace the use of Creole, even in their own less than formal interaction?
Okay. I would say that historically, there was that significant divide in terms of, there was a phrase we used to use here. Persons were called country bookie. Years back, if they used the language as a derogatory term, yeah, implying that you were from the countryside, and the code that you use was less than, yes. But I think that clear demarcation of standard English was for the upper class individuals and the Creole for lower class individuals. I think it has gotten a little smaller. It's not as clear cut, because we have a lot of research here that points to shifting attitudes, pointing to more positive attitudes. Now, it's rather ironic. I believe Hazel Simmons McDonald references this at some point in some of her writings, that you see this increased awareness. So, for instance, we have the language used in Parliament. Certainly, it was used by Dame Paulette Louisy. Our members of Parliament do code switch. So it is acceptable to go from one language to another in Parliament. So that is fine. When we have celebrations like Creole Day, Journée Creole, you see that there's this thrust, persons are all dressed in madras and so on. So on one hand, there is this thrust and seeming acceptance or greater acceptance of the language for some formal spheres, for cultural, as a mark of cultural identity, yes? But the biggest fight still exists when it comes to education. So I'm saying this to say there is a greater acceptance. You can see it in from youngsters, from younger individuals, but it's almost like the acceptance is selective. It is in certain aspects of or related to language use, but not in education. I think that a lot of middle-class individuals who are bilingual wear their bilingualism or display their bilingualism with a lot of pride, yes, and are quite comfortable with allowing persons to know that, yes, I do have a certain degree of competence in standard English, but I can also just as eloquently use my Creole. And that is because of the push of a lot of certain individuals who have been using the language in what would have been previously reserved as formal context. Now, that is not to say that we still don't have, prevailing negative attitudes, yes? But I do believe that there is more of a shift towards the positive attitudes, yes? I just wish the positive attitudes were really, really in the area of education, but I remain optimistic, yes, that we will get there. But certainly there's a greater valorization of the language in my
and so
opinion.
my follow-up to that, and you actually took it there, is, so my question is, so where's the resistance, right? So if we accept that Creole is connected to your sense of identity, if we are breaking down the barriers, the class barriers, in terms of the acceptability of its use, in terms of embracing it, in terms of recognizing the significance of it. So where is the resistance to the integrating and greater utilization of so go ahead.
Well, I will say the resistance is in the classroom.
So specifically that educators,
not necessarily educators, because there's also research that points to teachers increasingly having more positive attitudes in terms of using Creole in the classroom, and teachers increasingly understanding the value of the language. We're looking at maybe pushback from parents, pushback from politicians, yeah?
And so then my question,
because
the question then becomes why. So the reason I'm asking where the divide is that if we find the divide, then we can sort of figure out what the issue is. So if it's an age divide, I would understand, right? That people who are age, they're set that that's the way it is. English is what you do in school, and Creole is what you do at home. And they're resistant to change. If it was a class divide, I'd understand it. But
I think even I really want to jump in this.
No, go for it, please.
The resistance, I mean, in the case of Haiti, we know post the assassination of the founders, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, following the arrest of Toussaint Louverture, and we know the ruling elite used the French as a means of marginalizing, alienating, and exploiting the masses. And this has continued. That history, that undercurrent continues to today. And the resistance is connected to all the, I think we all address it, that devaluation of the language by colonial powers, that self-hatred that developed in the context of the slavery colonial context. So this continues. I mean, I teach today, and
by class, is there a clear class division also in terms of linguistic class division still in Haiti today?
Well, you know what?
The upper class or the middle class, upper middle class, whatever you want to call them, right? that they French is their language, and never shall I be heard speaking
Unless
Creole.
if whatever, however menial the vote they know, they need to speak to the people in Haitian Creole. Even if it's a political theater. Go ahead.
Right. But I think it gives them the middle class and the upper class. Well, we were talking about demarcation. I think there's a clear demarcation in Haiti. You have a small bilingual elite and a very large Creole-speaking population. It's very clear demarcation because we don't have a very large middle class in Haiti.
Right.
You don't have a very large middle class, and we have even a tinier upper class elite, so to speak. So it's a clear demarcation. And it's to their advantage to keep French as the language of government, the language of schools, and it's to their advantage. You know, they feel that they are asserting a sense that they are better, they are superior to the masses, and it continues to this day. Although I would say that Creole is making a lot of inroads in Haiti, especially in Haiti. We had, as of 1979, we had a policy as to how education should be conducted in Haiti, where what we call Réforme Bernard. Bernard was the Minister of Education in Haiti, and he said, you know, at the beginning, you're going to start teaching the kids in Creole. And after the first 4 years, you would transition to French. Well, obviously, there hasn't been much follow through because education in Haiti is still in the hands of the private sector. It's really controlled by the private sector.
And let me underscore here, at the beginning also, one of the players into what language was used as a vehicle of instruction was the former colonial power. And they would give you money toward education, insisting, imposing, in fact, that you use the French language, that you buy French books from their publishers. So it's a way.
So we signed an agreement with the Vatican to have French, you know, when education began in Haiti, to have French priests and brothers come to Haiti to provide education to young Haitians. And obviously they were going to do it in French.
Power, the former colonial power.
Right. So they were going to have education in French, and this continued until very, very recently. And but I would say that now Creole is gaining a lot of grounds in Haiti. And as Lily said, no respecting population would go into a Haitian crowd and start speaking French. You know, it would make sense. So it's gaining a lot of grounds, despite of the resistance from the elite, in spite of the resistance from the middle class too.
Dr. Deputy, I'm going to throw another one at you. You ready for me?
Oh, certainly.
All right. So as I understand the struggle for linguistic equality, right? One of the challenges, or one of the obstacles maybe, that was put in the way was the struggle of standardization, right? So, and I know you referenced it in your lecture. You referenced some of the major points, like the publication of a dictionary of Jamaican patois, and I think you mentioned one in Trinidadian patois. In the North American context, there was a huge of biblical text, for example, in I believe in Gullah or DJ, I don't remember which, Gullah, I believe. Are there similar efforts taking place? And it's particularly if we're talking about integrating Creole into a formal education system, and we want to be able to measure literacy in the language. Can you tell me a little bit about where St. Lucia is in the process, or what the experience has been in terms of even establishing, well, what is the standard? So how do I accurately communicate written form using
Yes.
Creole?
We actually do have a written orthography for French Creole. We use the Antillean, French Creole orthography. Quite interestingly, that orthography was developed, perhaps, if I'm correct, maybe in the 80s. So the orthography has been there for a long time. It is just that efforts to...
Is it shared? I'm sorry to cut you off, because you said it's Antillean. So I hear Antillean and I start thinking St. Martin is in here, Guadeloupe is in here, Martinique.
No, we're looking at Dominica, Martinique, that shared orthography. Yeah.
Okay.
Guadeloupe,
so this is the shared one for across that region, the Windward sort of gathering. Okay.
Shucks.
I'm so sorry I cut you off and made you lose your train of thought. It's all right.
So yes, so you're speaking about the orthography. Yes, so we do have an orthography for St. Lucian French Creole that we use. I know that there are certain activists who have recommended a review for a greater one-to-one correspondence between sound and the symbols representing the sounds. But for the most part, when it comes to we have more of the standardization with the French Creole than with the English vernacular. Yeah. Really? So this is why we have a translation of the Old Testament in addition to two versions, two Creole dictionaries. One of them is a more comprehensive dictionary, and there's another version which was put forth through a collaboration between the Ministry of Education and I can't remember that. I'm just remembering the Frank name now. So we have literature in Creole. So it is possible to get books that have our Creole folklore. We can read and write. So that is why you can actually have a program which teaches. So there is the standardization in that regard. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that there's also work being done, in particular in light of your research, that there's work being done on creating a graduation level assessment similar or equal footing to the CXC English. So
that is one of for me, one of my dreams. I like to use this term, the intellectualization of Creole. For me, that is the ultimate goal, where you have this language which will be used for intellectual discourse. So perhaps we could have had this session fully in Creole, yeah, where it would become acceptable that we discuss language issues in the actual language as academics, yeah. So for me, that is where I'd like to see the language or the use of the language. That is what I'd like to see it do. That's that. I want to see that capability of Creole come to fruition.
And that's what we do every year during the month of October. You can echo me on that, Eve, is that every presentation, every participant in the conference present in Creole, particularly to illustrate that all conversation, science, and language, so that we can demarginalize the language, decolonize the language, raise the status of the language. And next year, I will have you present in Haitian Creole. In
Haitian Creole. Yeah.
My apologies.
That's right.
On of the floor, I want to quickly ask Dr. Depradine.
I wanted to make a couple of comments, Lily, if you would permit me.
Please go ahead.
Yes. I think Yes, we have an orthography since 1979. The Haitian Constitution also allowed us to create a Haitian Creole Academy. And today they had a meeting where they were trying to put some fine points on the standardization of the Haitian Creole orthography. We have plenty of texts in Haitian Creole. One of them that I use is this Haitian Creole dictionary. The church has been instrumental in developing plenty of texts. You know, the Bible has been translated into Haitian Creole. We have many texts in Haitian Creole. And right now I'm working on glossaries, science glossaries, math glossaries in Haitian Creole. So, you know, little by little, things are, coming along, you know. Go ahead.
And we have a lot of literary texts in Haitian.
And
there's a huge movement also to translate important writers that are very important, like Marie Chauvet, Gouverneur de la Rosée, Jacques Roumain, Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, those important Haitian writers into Haitian Creole to broaden the corpus of Haitian Creole texts to be used for serious literacy campaigns and to bolster what we do in education in Haiti at the K-16 level, I would say.
And is that intended entirely for an internal domestic market? Because then the challenge becomes, even from an economic point of view. So if I'm publishing a book and I publish it in Haitian Creole or St. Lucian Creole, then that limits the market until I start to export my language to others. So has the conversation, and I do know that so for example, I do know that we here at Medgar, since we're giving SALCC, let me give Medgar. So here at Medgar, we do actually have courses on Creole. We have courses for native speakers of Creole, for new learners like myself. So I'm signed up. So next year I'll be back in the student seat. But is there it seems to me that as part of that campaign, unless it's entirely domestically oriented, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, right? You're producing literature for your own consumption, specifically for your people. But is there a goal to export the language? Because if we're talking about language equity, here's what the languages, or father languages, lingua franca, whatever they want to call themselves. Here's what they have, right? They have the benefit of the colonial spread, right? So that when they say, yes, you need to learn French or to read this book in French or publish this book in French, that their audience for French readers is particularly broad. Is it that's a phase to come, or are we already at that phase where, whether it's Haiti, St. Lucia, Martinique?
We're not at that phase yet, and I wish we were. I think there is a need for greater collaboration between the Creole-speaking, nations. Perhaps even in the matter of orthography, perhaps the French based Creole should adapt the same orthography. That would make it easier to have,
and broaden your audience.
Broaden the audience, yeah, because that's certainly a factor. The economic factor, how big of an audience, how big of a market do you have when you're only doing it for yourself? So I think there's a need. There was almost a time when Creole could have become the official language of CARICOM. I think that would have been a good move to have Creole.
At least one of the official languages.
Official languages, right?
And have in the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, St. Lucia, Dominique, Haiti, with 15 million speakers, that is quite significant in terms of the Caribbean population. And we could make the case for having Creole, our Creole, one of the official languages, which is the question that I wanted to ask Dr. Depradine, whether within St. Lucia, is there a movement or there are activists demanding that the Creole becomes one of the official languages of the country, officially on the books?
Oh yes, that is certainly the end game, but we recognize that there is a process. Yes. For instance, Dr. Raymond mentioned the Haitian Academy, is it?
Yes.
Yes. So certainly St. Lucia would need a language commission, yeah, which could, so outside of local activists and so on, if you have this organization which now becomes the bastion of all things Creole, I think we have a greater case of, because the calls for making Creole an official language have been there for years. Right. And I think most of us agree, because we do realize for the gains that we want to see in education and so on to actually occur, these have to be grounded in the fact that the language has some sort of official status. Yes. But that having said so, we do recognize that it is still a process, or will be a process to actually get there. Yeah. So I believe perhaps the right route is the establishment of the commission, and with a clear mandate and so on, and that would push even more, I should say, for Creole to get equal status. That is what we want ultimately.
I have a question for you, Dr. Depradine. There is a movement in the Haitian community to rename Haitian Creole Haitian. Is there something
to just get rid of the Creole part?
Just get rid of the Creole.
That's right. Okay.
Is there such a move in
That's interesting. I believe I'm not aware of any such movement here. I believe the term Creole is accepted. So I'm not aware of, because you see, save for seeing that term in linguistic texts, I don't think the average St. Lucian says St. Lucian French Creole. No? The average St. Lucian would either say Creole as is or Creole, right? So I don't think that there's a need necessarily for a movement to, have that sort of identity, attached to the term. Because generally speaking, I think it's only in academic texts or contexts I see or hear that full name, St. Lucian English Vernacular or St. Lucian Creole. The average person would say, or some person still say patois. Yeah.
Just to your point, Eve, I believe, as I said, we are at different stages in this process as we look across the region. Undoubtedly, as I said, Haiti is way out in front in terms of this struggle. But I think the question you raised is interesting, in the sense that when we refer to it as a dialect, when we refer to it as a patois, when we refer to it as a Creole, and it's just a sort of a stage of self-realization that in and of itself is also reinforcing the idea that it somehow differs from the established languages, that it is somehow a derivative. Yes. It is somehow second, it is somehow native, it is any of those things, because nobody calls Spanish, Latin Creole, right?
Although there have been attempts to call Ebonics, a form of Creole.
Yeah.
Well, there are linguists who claim all languages are Creole.
There you go.
It's the creolization process is inherent to every language, because that's how languages are created. It's those interactions. And there's also a huge school within Haiti and the Haitian community that pushes back on that and said, we are claiming it. The same way I think some people claim the queer word, some people claim other words that people try to trivialize,
Interrogative, yeah.
etc., make pejorative, make into pejorative expression. And I think the Creole identity is very strong and very well anchored. I mean, we inherit in Haitian culture, in the Haitian linguistic or literary space, songs that said the people were affirming they were Creole during the slavery colonial time. C'est Creole non ye. Creole parler, Creole comprendre. They've assumed that. Why are we now trying to cultivate, other things to divide us? You know what I mean? And who are we?
There is that too.
Who are we out?
And the other, beyond that, the other issue is how do you make it take hold? How do you get 15 million Haitians to start saying that now we speak Haitian, nous parlons Haitien, instead of nous parlons Creole, which is what they're saying now? Will there have to be some government intervention? Do you have to legislate this? So there are questions around this whole issue.
So with that, I have to say, as has always been the case with our conversations, Dr. Surratt, this conversation is not by far ended. This is an ongoing, not just conversation, but struggle, and ongoing mission for the region is to get this linguistic equality and to better utilize. I did want us to have a little time to talk about the linguistic processing that Dr. Deperdine mentioned in her presentation, but I'm afraid we might have to push that to another date.
I can suggest, because we in the Haitian community here, we also take time in February during Black History Month where we mark International Mother Tongue Day, because the UNESCO has, I think is it the 21st of February, Eve?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
So,
February, yes. I don't know exactly.
I am down, Dr. Surratt. So if just let me know. We'll put together an fascinating panel, and we certainly continue this conversation. Unfortunately, as entertaining as it is, I do have a class that I have to go teach.
just audience of our continuing conversation in Haitian Creole for the weekend. Why don't you do the honor, Eve? Tell what's going to happen.
Yes, this weekend we're marking International Creole Day. It's more than a day. It's actually, we're doing it over 3 days, even though we don't think it's enough, but we're doing it for 3 days. Friday, tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. Tomorrow and Friday and Saturday we'll be at Brooklyn College. And on Sunday, it's going to be at Medgar Evers College. So
you have lined up for Friday and Saturday specifically. This is your chance to make the pitch. What do you guys, what's happening in Brooklyn?
Well, our theme this year is literacy in Haiti, literacy campaigns. How come we have such a high illiteracy rate in Haiti right now? We've started doing literacy campaigns since 1943. And yet, and the language issue is at the core of this in a way, because, and we're going to be discussing this in many of the presentations. So we invite the whole community to attend. And on Sunday, we have what we call bouillon culturel, bouillon culture. It's a cultural stew at Medgar Evers, okay? Where we're going to have performance,
Poetry.
dances, poetry, etc., etc. So we're inviting the whole community to come and join us.
This is going to be, as Dr. Sarah pointed out, in Creole.
Yes.
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 All right. Wonderful.
So a chance for immersion, Dr. Irish Bramble.
Yes, I will be there. So I'm going to be immersed. So, come next week, I'll be perfectly fluent and, I'm not going to overpromise. Let me not overpromise. All right, Dr. Depredine, it was a pleasure as always. And I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this effort. This is a first effort on the part of, well, actually, no, I guess not, but a continuing effort in the part of Dr. Sarah and I to push these conversations about Caribbean culture, Caribbean history, and the overall Caribbean experience. We are honored to have had you. We enjoyed your presentation immensely. And so on that note, I want to once again say thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to come and share your thoughts and to converse with us and our listening audience.
And it certainly was my absolute pleasure. And I really want to thank you for including me in the conversation. And I look forward to future conversations. Yes?
Indeed. Indeed. Dr. Sword, do you want to make any closing remarks?
Well, no, thank you. And those conversations can, because we are in the business of building communities.
Indeed.
Strengthening our communities and strengthening the struggle so that we can get to our destination of really rights for everyone, all sorts of rights, the linguistic rights, the human rights, so on and so forth. Thank you so much, Dr. Depredine, for your participation in this conversation and your work.
Eve, and Eve, I want to thank you for joining with me in terms of moderating this conversation and for your contributions. It was a pleasure to meet you, and likewise, I look forward to engaging with you in our continued efforts to uplift the Caribbean people throughout the diaspora. So thank you for taking the time to join us, and we certainly did value your contributions to this evening's program.
Thank you.
Before we go, one last shout out. So a big shout out to my media specialist who is behind the scenes, Miss Sasha Richardson. Sasha, as always, thank you for all that you do to make our programming possible. I'm not in any way overstating it when I say, like, none of this would be possible if it were not for expertise and your commitment to the center, and continue to do so. Thank you very much, Ms. Richardson. I know she's camera shy, so I know she won't turn on the camera to respond, but and last but not least, thank you to everyone in the listening audience, whether you're listening to us live or you are watching the replay. Special also thank you to the Haitian Studies Institute in general and Brooklyn College for working with us, and the rest of our support staff here at Medgar Evers College. And with that, I want to wish everyone a good evening as we bring this program to a close. Thank you, everyone.